स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात्. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Sai Ram, dear sisters and brothers of Sai family. I am starting my 10th video on Sai Gita, the noble and the ignoble. Krishna said in the Gita that there are two types of people, the noble ones and the ignoble ones. The noble ones are those who follow the right path, the sacred path. They seek the company of great people and practice their teachings. As a result, they experience the great spiritual truths and enjoy the inner life of the spirit. Opposed to them are those who are full of unsacred thoughts and have impure hearts, who are under the spell of ignorance and live an unrighteous life. Their evil behavior can be said to be the direct opposite of the exemplary behavior of the noble ones, just as darkness is the opposite of light. Therefore, we can describe these two categories as that of gods and demons, or beings of light and beings of darkness. Krishna said, Arjuna, I thought up to now that you were noble, that you were a true knight, but I see that you are entering the wrong path. You are getting steeped in darkness. You are following unsacredness. It would be wrong to call you noble. You are proving yourself to be otherwise. Krishna gave Arjuna various such admonishments in order to encourage him to make a heroic effort to manifest the qualities of true nobility. He told him, the primary cause of your present grief is your attachment, and the basis for your attachment is ignorance. It is out of ignorance that you allow your senses to govern your actions. If you want to free yourself from attachment and sorrow, then you must control your senses. You have to clearly understand the nature of the senses. In the journey of life, these sense organs are important. They are like the horses of your chariot, which can take you to your goal. But only when you have full control over these horses will the chariot and the person riding in it be safe. If you leave them uncontrolled, it is inevitable that the chariot and its occupant will come to grief. Therefore, if you want to reach the goal safely, you must take charge of these horses. In other words, you must assert absolute control over your sense organs. The nature of the sense organs. When Krishna spoke of the sense organs, he mentioned that they have the capacity to measure. For example, the tongue determines the taste of food, deciding whether a thing is sweet or bitter. It does this by measuring the relative sweetness and bitterness of the food. Similarly, the ears determine whether some music is melodious or not, and eyes discern the beauty of objects seen. In this way, all the senses measure different qualities. Krishna also spoke of certain limitations of the sense organs as ordained by God to ensure their right use. For example, you can use the nose for smelling and for breathing. If you use the nose correctly, you are obeying the commands of the Lord and will surely benefit thereby. If instead of using the nose for breathing and smelling good things, you use the nose to inhale noxious drugs, then you are not using it in the way specified by God. As for the tongue, you have the Lord's gentle reminder, child, use this tongue to talk sweetly and not hurt others' hearts. Use words which give them joy. The other functions of the tongue must also be attended to. Use your tongue to take in fresh, wholesome food which is full of vitamins and proteins. On the other hand, if you use your tongue and sense of taste for smoking cigarettes or drinking alcohol, you will be misusing the tongue. Then you will be disobeying the commands of the Lord and you will come to harm. In this way, you should use all of the sense organs for the specific task which have been assigned to them by God. Then you will be fulfilling the purpose for which each instrument has been given. This kind of regulated behavior will help you to achieve your life's goal. As a result of the functioning of the senses, you may experience joy or grief. This joy or grief that you feel does not come from the senses themselves. It is only after the senses have come into contact with the sense objects that you will experience these feelings. For instance, suppose you are on a protracted visit to a friend in a neighboring town, and while you are away, something happened in your home. No matter what happened, whether good or bad, you would experience neither happiness nor grief, joy nor sorrow, as long as your ears had not heard the news. But once you get a phone call and came to know what happened at home, if the news is good, you would feel joy, and if the news is bad, you would feel sorrow. It is only after the senses become associated with the sense object that the joy or grief would have come to you. Those bound by the senses are destroyed by the senses. There are a vast number of sense objects in the world, but you should see to it that your senses do not come into contact with too many of these. They are all impermanent things. By becoming captivated with small things, your whole life becomes small and impure. You can see this in a number of living beings which are victims of one or two senses. For example, when a deer hears some melodious music, it becomes fascinated by it and can easily be captured. Therefore, a deer is bound by sound. A huge elephant can be controlled through the sense of touch and therefore becomes bound by touch. In this way, a number of animals can be bound and controlled through different sense organs. Take, for example, a moth. When it sees light, it gets strongly attracted to it. It becomes bound by the light and may be destroyed by it. In a similar way, a fish will swallow the bait and gets caught because it is bound by taste. And a bee will enter a flower and be bound by the power of smell. There it can get trapped for the night when the flower closes its petals. Each one of these beings is bound by one of these sense organs, but man is bound by all five of them, and therefore he is even vulnerable than all these animals. Here is a small story. Once upon a time, a great sage undertook a tour of the country. He considered each one of the five elements as his teacher. Once he happened to go to the shore of the ocean. He was enjoying the waves and the various aspects of the ocean. As he was watching, along came a wave and brought some debris to the shore. He noticed that the moment any drops fell into the ocean, the waves came and pushed it back out. The sage thought to himself, why should the ocean, which is so deep and vast, find it necessary to throw out this little bit of filth? Could it not allow even such a small impurity to remain with it? Then he went into meditation. In that meditation, he understood that if the ocean were to allow any impurities to stay in its waters, these impurities would accumulate day by day and in time cover the whole ocean and pollute it. He decided that the ocean must have resolved not to allow any debris or impurity to come into it from the very beginning. In that way, it had been able to remain clean and pure. In the same way, right from the start, you should see to it that impure thoughts and ideas do not enter your mind, even in a small way. Not even the minutest impurity should be allowed to enter your heart. Before such an impurity can establish a foothold, you must immediately throw it out. If you give room to it, thinking that after all it is only a very insignificant thing and it cannot really harm you, then it will start growing in the heart. Therefore, if you understand the functioning of the senses and learn to limit them to the right use for which they were intended, then you will be able to benefit from them and not be disturbed by them. If instead you allow the senses to rule you and bind you, neither joy nor peace of mind will be yours. Here is another small story to illustrate this. The king who was ruled by his 5 wives. Once there was a great king who had 5 wives, but his wives never listened to him. He might have been a king to everyone else, but he was not lord over his own wives, and so he was suffering very much. He had a crown on his head, but inside his head there were only worries. I have become a slave of these wives, and I am suffering very much, he thought. Is there anyone in the world who is not afraid of his wife? If there is such a one, how does he control her? How does he manage not to be dominated by her? To inquire into this directly by asking individual citizens would not have been considered proper, so he decided to hold a public meeting and invite all his male subjects to attend. There were two stadium-sized tents put up at the meeting ground. One was erected on one side of the field, the other was put up on the other side. The king announced that the first tent was meant for people who had controlled their wives, and the second one was meant for people who were controlled by their wives. All the male citizens of that country started pouring into the capital. They all went straight into the second tent. The king went there and found that this huge tent, the one that was intended for those who were controlled by their wives, was filled to capacity. He got a little craze from this, for he realized that he was not the only one controlled by his wives. But before beginning the meeting, he saw one lone person waiting in the first tent, which was meant for those who had control over their wives. That mammoth tent was totally empty except for this one man. The king was overjoyed to see him there. He went to him and told him how glad he was to see that at least one person in his kingdom had gained control over his wife. The king questioned him, "Tell me, good man, what is your secret in controlling your wife?" The man, trembling with fear, replied, no, sir, that is not how it is. I cannot control her. It is I who am I being completely controlled by her. The king said, "Then why did you come into this tent with this knees?" Shaking and stammering his words, the man replied, "My wife ordered me to come into this tent. She forbade me to go into the other. That is why I am here. My wife ordered me not to go inside the tent where the slaves of their wives are staying. She made me go into this one." The king got very irritated with the man and commanded him, you must leave here immediately. Under no condition can you remain in this tent. Go and join the others in the second tent." The citizen turned white with fear. The blood rushed out of his face. He got down on his knees and implored the king with his hands folded in supplication. "My lord, please listen to me. You may punish me. You may do anything you wish to me. But I am terrified of disobeying my wife. Please don't make me go to the other tent." The king then realized that there were no people anywhere in his kingdom who were not slaves of their wives. The mind with its five wives, the senses. The king is the mind, and he is never able to satisfy all his wives, namely the senses. The eye demands, take me to a place where only the most beautiful sights are to be seen. The tongue demands that only the tastiest of foods be supplied to it. The other commands that the most melodious sounds be played for it. The skin desires to feel only materials which are the most pleasing to touch, and the nose wants to smell the very best perfumes in the world. Who can satisfy all these desires of the senses? There is no coordination and cooperation among them. If you yield to the sense organs, they are going to give you a lot of trouble. Right from the beginning, you must find a way to bring them under absolute control. Then you will have accomplished something truly worthwhile. The real hero in this world is is the one who has managed to completely control his senses. When the senses make their demands, do not listen to them. Instead, turn your mind towards the higher intellect. Let it decide what is to be done. Then the lower mind will follow and in turn give its commands to the senses. This way, the senses will have to obey. That is the proper way to curb the senses. A person who bases his life on his lower mind and senses will come to ruin and become worse than an animal. The wise one bases his life on his higher mind, which is his intellect, his power of discrimination and discernment and intuition. One who follows his higher mind becomes the most excellent of human beings. If you base your life on your higher mind, your buddhi, it will make you stay to the final goal. But if you base your life only on the lower mind and the senses, then every moment new changes will come about. It will become difficult to predict what will happen to you and where you will land. It is something like crossing a raging river or a storm-tossed ocean in a small boat. You do not know when your little boat will get flooded and when disaster will overtake you. Being over vigilant in controlling the senses. There was a great saint in ancient India. He was an extremely virtuous person, a truly wise man. He had complete control over his senses. One day it became known that his end would come soon. All his disciples assembled there and gathered around his bed. He was suffering from intense pain in the throat. He made heroic efforts to transcend the pain. He seemed to want to say something, but he could not speak. The disciples were very eager to find out what message their master was trying to give them during his last moments on earth. The disciples tried to help him in every way and implored him, Swami, you want to tell us something? We are eager to hear your message. Summoning his last bit of energy, the sage found his voice and said, my dear children, I have been followed all this time by Maya, the power of illusion. Illusion told me everyone else become my slave. No one has succeeded in becoming free of me except you. You have been able to completely control your sense organs and thereby you have been able to conquer me. Then I replied, Maya, I have conquered you up to now, but you know and I know that I have not fully conquered you yet. There is still a little life left and a few breaths are still to come. Until my very last breath has been taken, I will not relax until I have conquered you totally. My dear children, until now I have been able to control the senses and conquer Maya, but I do not know whether I will continue to succeed until my last breath. During these last few moments, in order to free myself from Maya, I have been thinking only of God and praying to Him with all my heart. Then he fell silent and thus he consummated his life. As this story shows, As this story shows, you must be careful until the very last breath of your life not to yield to the sense organs to realize the immortal self. You must control the outgoing senses. Therefore, sense control is an integral part of the path of wisdom as taught by Krishna. Once you gain full control of the senses, you will easily be able to master the spiritual path. In the beginning, you may be subjected to a certain amount of difficulty. When you learn to drive, you first have to go to an open field and practice there. It is only after you have learned to control the car and have mastered the art of driving that you can take the car into the main thoroughfares and the narrow streets of the city. If you try driving in city traffic before that, it will not only be difficult for you but also dangerous similarly. Once you have mastered the senses and are unaffected by the allurements of the world, then you can face any situation without concern or problems. Victory over the senses through self inquiry. To master the senses, you should develop a broad view. Enter into the spirit of inquiry and find out who is the true self and who is the false self. After developing this discriminating power, you can safely move in the world while continuing to keep your sight steadily on the goal. The wavering senses can never give you permanent joy. Only when you gain the knowledge of the true self, the immortal self, will you experience true joy. All other knowledge and education will only help you to eke out a livelihood. Knowledge of the self alone is true education. With that, you will be able to enjoy the unity of all existence. Once you identify yourself with the divinity that is in everything, then there can be no further collapses arising from any sense of difference. When you experience everything as God and see the whole world as God, then even the practice of discrimination falls away. Once everything is seen as one, then there is no further need for discrimination. As Baba has mentioned before, the senses can be very dangerous, then they can be like horses running wild. If you do not use the reins to control them, they will run away with the chariot and go wherever they like. Rein the senses in with the help of your mind. Let your taste, your smell, your sight, your listening, your touch, all the various sense impressions come under your control. A number of times Swami has been telling you that you should not see or hear too many things. It is only when you see a thing or hear about it that you start thinking of it. Once you think of it, you develop an attraction towards it. Then you want to possess it. Once you talk about a particular thing, then you think of its own form. Therefore, whatever may be the object, the first thing you should ask yourself is, does it have any defects or flaws? When you realize its flaws, that it will not last, that is ephemeral, then you will not develop any attachment for it. If you want to reach God, you must be free of false vision, false speech, and a false attachment to any sensory impressions. Control of the tongue, the first step in sense control. Spiritual practice begins with control of the tongue. The reason for this is that tongue has two functions. The eyes have only the one function, that of seeing. Similarly, the ears have only the one function, that of hearing, and the nose has only the one function, that of smelling. But the tongue has two functions. It can speak and it can taste. Therefore, you must make a special effort to control it. You have no right to criticize others. You have no right to think badly about others. It is far better for you to think of your own shortcomings, see the good in others, and remove the unreal in yourself. If you have not even developed the power to inquire into your own true self, then how can you assume the power to look into others? First, get a fulfillment in your own life. It is only after you have saved yourself that you can become an instrument to save others. Therefore, you should not use harmful words or give condescending looks or think impure thoughts towards any other persons. Spend your time only in good thoughts, in good listening, and good talk. In order to exercise self control, you have to do some spiritual exercises. Constant practice and detachment are essential for gaining control over your senses. If you understand that all things are impermanent, you will be able to gain control over your senses and develop detachment. Your true nature is nobility. You are not base and ignoble. Enter into good paths and develop your own innate sacredness. Only when you have the light of wisdom shining inextinguishably within you will you be able to help others through your good thoughts, good sight, and good counsel. Those who do so are very tably gods. Those who display the opposite traits are demons. Demons seek only darkness, but you must resolve to give up darkness and fill yourself with light. If you chose the path of light, then whatever has been your past, the Lord will accept you and shower His grace upon you. The pure brother of the impure demon king, the brother of the lord of the demons, surrendered to Rama and fell at Rama's feet. Seeing him, the generalissimo of Rama's army warned Rama, he is the brother of Ravana. Like his evil brother, he is a demon. He loves darkness. Just because he has had some quarrel with his brother and left him, you should not trust him and give him shelter. Even though he now proclaims himself to be an enemy of his brother, it is still dangerous to believe him. Rama smiled patiently and told his commander, brave warrior, I accept him not because he has opposed his brother, but because he has surrendered himself to me. I will give protection to whoever comes to me and says, I am yours. I do not care who he is. The commander then said to Rama, you have given this demon your protection and assured him that when this war is over and his brother Ravana is overthrown, you will make him the king of Lanka. But suppose this evil Ravana came to you now and surrender himself at your feet. What kingdom would you give him? Rama replied, if Ravana had such fine ideas and were to surrender himself to me, I would ask my own brother Bharta, who is ruling the kingdom in my behalf, to step down, and I would make Ravana the king of my capital city of Ayodhya. I have never asked anyone for anything. Asking for favors is not my way. But if Ravana were to have such good thoughts, I would ask Bharta to give up his throne. Throughout the ages, divine incarnations have been espousing sacred thoughts and broad ideas such as this. In that way, they set an example for the whole world to follow. The point of this story is that whatever your past, whatever impure and unsacred environment you have been brought up in, if your resolve is pure and you surrender yourself fully to God, He will take you in. Start by mastering your senses. This is the first step in leading a noble life and getting closer to your divine source. Sense control is the basis for all sacred action and for enjoying a worry free life. Krishna said, Arjuna, there is nothing that you will not be able to achieve once you have gained complete control of your senses. You will be master of the world, but if you are a slave of the senses and get caught up in desire, you become a slave of the world. Therefore, master your senses, make the senses your control over your senses. Make the senses your slaves. Only then will you be able to function as an instrument in my mission. Arise, Arjuna, listen to control your senses. Do not get elated by joy or dejected by grief. The primary reason for this grief of yours is ignorance. You do not know the difference between truth and illusion, between reality and appearance, between the true self and the false self. Begin now to discriminate between them. Practice discrimination, and your senses will come under control. Then all will be yours. You are the indweller. You are not the body or mind. Krishna said, Arjuna, I am your very self. Focus your mind steadily on me, and with your mind fixed on me, do your duty. Embodiments of love. If you do your work being aware of your own reality, you will accomplish great things. Actions performed with the awareness of the Atma, your true self, are free from bondage. To carry on your work while at the same time being fully aware of your identity with the Atma requires control over the senses. Sense control is an essential precondition for being illumined. Once you enjoy complete control over your sense organs, you can be described as a person imbued with the highest wisdom. When you consider all the pairs of opposites such as joy and sorrow, heat and cold, profit and loss, honor and dishonor, with an equal mind and are established in your true reality, then you have gained the characteristics of a wise man. It is the nature of the wise to treat everything equally. Once you recognize the nature of the senses, you will be easy for you to follow the path that leads to true wisdom. But if instead of identifying yourself with the Atma, you continue to identify yourself only with your body mind complex, then it will be impossible for you to obtain that exalted state. You are the Atma, you are God. Krishna told Arjuna, always remember that you are the indweller, not the body. You are the one who wears the cloth, you are not the cloth itself. You are the resident of the house. You are not the house, you are the witness, the knower of the individual. You are not the individual, but now, Arjuna, you are mistaking yourself to be this limited individual. Enjoyment of impermanent things can only give you impermanent happiness. Eventually, all these momentary pleasures and enjoyments will only turn into sorrow. Keep your mind steady and discharge your duties. Remembering the Atma, do not think or worry about birth and death or the joy and sorrow which accrue to you. Birth and death are relevant only to the body, they do not refer to you. You are not the body, you are the permanent entity which is free from birth and death. You have neither a beginning nor an end. You were never born and you will never die, nor will you ever kill anyone. You are the Atma. You are all pervasive. Verily, you are God. Your very self is God and God is yourself. After realizing that it is in the nature of fire to produce heat, would anyone grieve over the fact that fire burns? Would anyone suffer from sorrow after learning that ice cools? The very nature of the fire is to burn, and very nature of the ice is to cool whatever it comes in contact with. In the same way, everything which is born will someday die. This is natural. Whatever is free to come must also be free to go. Therefore, you should not brood over things which are natural, like breath, birth and death, joy and sorrow. Recognize the inherent defects and the weakness of all things. One day or another, everything existing in the world will have to undergo change. The same five elements which are to be found everywhere in the world are also to be found in you and everyone else. Whatever things you desire, whatever things are seeking, even if you pursue your search for them into the farthest corners of the world, you will discover that you are really just seeking the five elements. These five elements are all you will find in any of the things of the world. But since they are already part of you, what is the point of seeking them in the things outside? It is natural for you to seek and aspire for something which you do not have. It is unnatural for you to seek and aspire for something which you already have. There is only one entity which transcends the five elements, that is the divinity. That is what you should aspire for. Keep the Atma in view and nothing can harm you. Wisdom is seeing the one everywhere, that all pervasive unity is the Atma. Seek out this unity, keep it constantly in view. When all your actions are based on the Atma, they become sacred and pure. When all your activities are performed for the sake of Atma or for the pleasure of God, then you become sanctified and filled with spiritual wisdom. A number of sages right from ancient days have made heroic efforts to attain this supreme state of being immersed in the highest wisdom. Once upon a time, the king of Greece, Alexander, reached the banks of the great river on the northwestern border of India. He intended to enter India to conquer and plunder it, but for this purpose he had come with a mighty army. In those days there were no royal roads. The few roads that existed were mere like footpaths. The king crossed the banks of the river and entered the forest with his army. The scouts preceding the army found a yogi lying under a tree with his legs spread out across the path, deep in sleep. This yogi had attained the stage of enlightenment. He was a truly wise man. One soldier went up and awakened the yogi and commanded him to move out of the path, but the yogi was totally indifferent to the orders given by the soldier. He did not move. The Greek soldiers started threatening the yogi and boasted that the great emperor of Greece, Alexander, was coming with his army and that this emperor had decided to invade India and plunder the entire nation. While the soldier was shouting at this yogi, Alexander arrived on the scene. The Greek soldier was engaged to see that even after the emperor had come, this yogi remained completely unconcerned. The yogi was not paying the proper respect and courtesy due to emperor. At this, the soldier threatened to cut off the yogi's head. The moment the yogi heard that the enraged Greek soldier wanted to cut off his head, he started laughing and stood up. On the yogi's face there was no trace of fear. He was amused, but at the same time he remained completely serene. The emperor saw the great effulgence on the yogi's face and spoke to him. My soldier has just threatened to cut off your head, and yet you seem very happy and unaffected. If you were an ordinary person, you would have immediately fall at his feet, beg for pardon, and try to save your life. But you are only smiling. What is the meaning of your behavior? The yogi replied, I am the eternal truth. I am pure awareness. I am infinite bliss. I am forever free. Your weapons cannot harm me. Fire cannot burn me. Water cannot wet me. Wind cannot blow me away. I was never born and I will never die. I am the immortal Atma, the one true self. I am indestructible. Thinking that I am just this body, your soldier is threatening to destroy me by cutting the head of this body. Is not that ludicrous? Hearing this provoked me to laughter. When the emperor heard these words, he was astounded. He thought to himself, it is natural for people to get frightened when someone threatens to kill them and they are about to face death. But rarely will anyone laugh and be so happy when they are about to die. In India, there are people who have attained such a high spiritual state that they are not even afraid of death. How can I conquer a nation such as this? No, I won't succeed here with my weapons. Having concluded that India could not be subdued by him, he turned his army around and penetrated no further into India. Sense control is easy when you understand the senses. From times immemorial, great beings such as this yogi have existed in India, and in the way in which they conducted their lives taught other nations the highest truths about spirituality. They showed the spiritual heights that could be achieved through control of the senses. People who do not know the method of controlling the sense organs get lost and stray into the wrong path. But actually, controlling the senses is quite easy. When you do not understand the fickle nature of the senses, all attempts to control them are fraught with difficulty. But once you understand their limitations, control them becomes easy because you realize that all the pleasures and enjoyments you gain through them are filled with sorrow. The first step in controlling the senses is to investigate the defects and problems associated with the various objects of the world. For the sake of temporary joys and pleasures, you are subjecting yourself to many difficulties and problems that will hound you long after the little fleeting joys are forgotten. A person who has a disease may take some food items which are not prescribed in the diet and feel temporarily happy. Having ignored the diet and taken food which is prohibited, he may experience some temporary joy, but in a short period of time, he will experience the unhappy consequences of his acts. It may even lead to a dangerous situation. In the same way, man yielding to temporary joys will suffer a great many problems in the long run. How many powerful kings have there been who have created huge mansions and palaces, enjoyed luxurious comforts, eaten a variety of luxurious foods, traveled in luxurious cars, and indulged themselves in countless vanities, all the while thinking that they were enjoying all the great pleasures available on the earth? What has happened to them in the end? Ask yourself, is a king who indulges himself like that really enjoy the luxuries, and are the luxuries enjoying him? You will have to conclude that it is the luxuries which are enjoying him. It is he who is being enjoyed by the sense objects. They are literally eating him up. Soon he becomes weak, he becomes diseased and gets old. If the king were really enjoying the sense objects, then he should have attained unbounded health and strength from them. But as he is the one who is being enjoyed by the sense objects, he loses all his health and his lifespan gets reduced. Not recognizing this truth, he temporarily experiences some happiness. He fixes his vision on these transient sense objects without realizing the dire consequences which ultimately must come his way because of his indiscriminate desire to enjoy the senses. Realize the transitoriness of all sense objects. Is certain man went to a palmist who told the people's future by reading the lines on their hand. The man showed the palmist his hand. The palmist told the man that there was a line on his hand which signified that he would become very wealthy. The moment the man heard this, he was overjoyed. After looking at his hand some more, the palmist told him that the line also showed that he would get a lot of honors. The man felt even more happy. Then, after examining the hand still further, the palmist said, "You are going to occupy a very high position." The man felt so happy it was as if he had just been told that he would become Prime Minister that very day. After a while, the palmist told him that he was going to have many children. Joy was now heaped on joy. Then, after telling him all these things, the palmist said, "But your lifespan is going to be very short." The moment the man heard this, all his joy left him. He got totally dejected and shrank down in despair. Whatever may be your property and wealth, whatever position you may occupy, whatever honors you may get, and however many children you may have, if you only have a finite lifespan, then what will be the use of all these things in the long run? If you are not going to be alive, then how can any one of these things be of lasting value to you? How many kings and how many emperors have lived? In what circumstances have they left this world? In the history of India, there once was an emperor who ruled over all the hundreds of kingdoms comprising this huge land. He was most powerful but did He not have to leave this world. In ancient time there was an even mightier emperor who ruled over the entire world. Could he take even a handful of earth with him? King Rama built a magnificent bridge spanning the ocean from India to Lanka. Where is that great bridge now? So many kings have come and gone. Not even one person can carry a handful of dust with him. If you think and reflect over the past history of mankind, you will be able to understand how impermanent this world really is. Therefore, two important defects to be noted about the worldly pleasure: they are impermanent and they are harbingers of misery. All that you see in the external world is but a reflection of what is inside you. There is only one thing which is real and true and all pervasive. That reality, that truth is always within you. It is eternally true. It is eternally auspicious and eternally beautiful. Make every effort to realize that permanent truth. Live in that auspiciousness. Be one with that divinity. It is the very embodiment of beauty. Focus on the divinity, your true self, and do your duty. After explaining the qualities of a wise man to Arjuna, Krishna directed him to enter the battlefield and fight. Krishna told him, keep all your attention on me, concentrate on me alone, obey all my commands and do your duty. This body has been given to you for the purpose of discharging your duty. It is because of your actions in the past that you have gotten this birth. Now you must use your actions to sanctify this life. The only light in this world which does not get extinguished is the light of the Atma, the light of the immortal self. As long as there is electricity, the electric bulbs will burn. The moment the power goes off, the bulbs do not shine. Only as long as there are batteries in the flashlight will function. In the same way, when the senses are not receiving any power, they will cease to function. Even the sun and the moon, which do not need either oil, batteries, or electricity, will lose their effulgence in the end. When the sun and the moon are likely to lose their light, what about you? When this is true of these mighty mountains, then what about this small pebble that is you? Deluded as you are with body consciousness, Krishna told Arjuna, because of the grief arising from your attachment to relatives and friends, you are getting drowned in ignorance. You are being washed away by the tears from your own eyes. Arise, awake, do not stop until the goal is reached. Thus, Krishna rescued Arjuna and put him on the right path. Intellect surpasses all your senses. The sun and the moon shine in the world, but they cannot illumine God. The light shining inside the house can illuminate the objects inside, but it cannot illuminate God. How do you know that the sun and the moon shine and that fire burns? On what basis can you declare that these things are bright and luminous? It is because of your eyes that you can recognize their brightness. If you did not have eyes, the radiant light of the sun and moon would not be seen by you. But as for these eyes, what is that helps them to see even when you are sleeping or when your eyes are closed? There is an unmistakable radiance shining in your awareness. Is it your highest intellect, your intuitive faculty, your buddhi? Therefore, you can conclude that even more effulgent than your eyes is your intellect. There is a small story to illustrate this. There were two friends, a blind man and a lame man. They would go begging together from village to village. The blind man had good legs and the lame one had good eyes. The lame man sat on the shoulders of the blind man, so with the help of each other they were able to go from village to village. Once on their way they came across a beautiful field of melons. The layman said to the blind man, brother, there are some very fine looking melons in this field. Let us go into the field and eat some. Afterwards we can take a little rest and proceed on your way. The blind man said to the lame person, brother, be careful. There may be some watchman keeping an eye on the field. The lame man said, "No, there is no one there." The blind man went on, "Please tell me if there is a fence or a gate around this garden." The lame one said, "There is neither a gate nor a fence. We can go and have our dinner." The blind person immediately said, "Brother, these melons must be very bitter and inedible. Otherwise, why is there no watchman, no fence, and no gate to protect them? A person may not have eyes to see, but if he uses his intellect, he is greater than the one who sees with these eyes. Therefore, it is really the intellect which lends a shining quality to the eyes. But from where does the intellect get its power? The intellect is shining because of the Atma. Therefore, because of the Atma, the intellect is illuminated, and because of the intellect, the eyes shine and can see, and because the eyes see, the effulgence of the sun and moon can be perceived, and because of the sun and the moon, the whole world shines. We see that the ultimate source that illuminates everything is the Atma. Therefore, it is the Atma which is you should worship. A wise man never forgets the Atma. It is only when you keep the Atma constantly in view in everything you do that you will be able to reach the stage of true wisdom. A wise man is sometimes thought of as having something to do with worldly people. This confusion comes about because it has been said that when everyone is awake, the wise man is asleep, and when he is awake, all the other people are sleeping. According to such a definition, you would conclude that those who work night shifts, such as the night watchman and the station master who are awake at night when others are sleeping and asleep during the day when others are awake, are all wise men. But obviously, this is not the correct meaning of the word. All those people who base their lives on this impermanent world will be fully awake to this world and its object. The wise man, on the other hand, will be asleep and indifferent to worldly objects. Ordinary people will not be alive to the beauty of the Atma. They will be sleeping through that. But when it comes to this world and its senses, objects that will be fully alert and awake. Therefore, a wise man is one who is asleep to the principle of the world and who is fully awake to the principle of Atma. A wise man is not one who has renounced the world and gone to the forest. Krishna said, "Do your work in the world, live in the midst of the things which are necessary for your daily life, but keep your attention and concentration constantly on the Atma. That way you will gain abiding wisdom." Here a doubt may arise. Why does such a wise man need to work at all? He will have no interest in work nor have any ambitions regarding work, and yet for the good of mankind he will take up work. If a wise man had the attitude that he did not need to work, then he would not be able to inspire others to work. The sage has to set an example for ordinary people so that they will be able to follow him. Therefore, Arjuna, said Krishna, become an ideal human being. You are very close to Krishna. You are his relative and you are very dear to him. Keep the inner significance of all these teachings in your heart. I want to raise you as an example to the world. I will use you as my instrument. You will be my instrument in doing many great things in the world. Whatever Krishna has said is for the welfare of the entire world and for setting an ideal example for mankind. All avatars undertake activities which are absolutely sacred, but ordinary people will not be able to recognize these activities as divine activities. In this context, Krishna told Arjuna, "Arjuna, I have not accepted the job of being the driver of your chariot because I like this task and want it so much. It is not for the sake of my love of horses either that I am doing this. Don't you think that I have chariots and horses of my own? Do I need to drive your chariot and your horses? This body consciousness that you have saturates your whole being. It is in your blood. I am enacting the entire play and I have taken on this task of driving your chariot in order to see to it that you become permanently cured of this disease of body consciousness. God does not wish to be praised by anyone. Arjuna frequently addressed Krishna using an affectionate phrase that referred to Krishna as his closest and dearest relative, the light of his heart. Krishna once told Arjuna when they were sitting on the banks of a river, Arjuna, I do not like to be revered by you as your dearest relative without reason. In the world, many people will freely praise God using terms of great respect or familiarity, but God will not accept such adulation. Praises will be very common for people to utter in order to gain favor. It is as if they were going to some government officer to get into his good graces. But praise, which has no real basis, is like perfumed water. It can be smelled, but it cannot be taken as nourishment. You will hear all manner of flattery, but it will not touch your heart. God accepts only true feelings that come sincerely from the depths of your heart. Krishna said to Arjuna, I do not want to ask you to give up calling me your closest relative, and yet you are saying it out of praise rather than because it is really true. Therefore, I want to become your relative so that you can say it sincerely, knowing in your heart that it is true. Shortly afterwards, Krishna offered his sister in marriage to Arjuna and became Arjuna's brother-in-law. Krishna's brother mm, Balram did not approve of this marriage and would not even come to the wedding. Instead, he went off to forests. From that time on, Balarama did not feel much love for Krishna, but for the sake of harmonizing thought, word and deed, Krishna was willing to risk his relation to his own closest kin, his older brother, who as a divine being had taken birth for the express purpose of assisting Krishna in his mission. This trait that we see here in Krishna of putting principles before considerations of kinship is truly extraordinary. His actions were always commensurate with his words. Unity of thought, word, and deed is the very nature of divinity. It is also the true nature of man. Whatever you think must be in harmony with what you say, and whatever you say that you must do. This harmony of thought, word, and deed is the deeper meaning of Swami's often repeated statement: the proper study of mankind is man. Krishna told Arjuna, I want to make an example of you to the whole world. That's why I am teaching you here on the battlefield the qualities of an enlightened being. First, I will turn you into a wise man, then, through your example, I will teach others. To begin with, you must understand this most important principle, which is that you are not the body, you are the indweller. When you understand that, you will no longer be bothered by body consciousness. Too, the body is temporary, God is eternal and permanent. You are not the clothes, but the one who wears the clothes. The body is the temple of God, but the indweller is God Himself. This world is impermanent and full of sorrow. There is no use taking refuge in it. All the people you know will change. God is the only fixed entity. He is the one lamp which does not get extinguished. Take shelter in Him. He is the supreme light. He is the light of the soul. He is the undiminisable light of pure consciousness. He is the one light without a second. Through such inspiring words, Krishna transformed Arjuna's heart, which had been filled with impurities, by explaining all these noble principles to him. Krishna made Arjuna's heart bright and pure. Krishna turned Arjuna into a true wise man, one who manifested all the divine qualities. Sense control, the key to the highest wisdom. Once you have gained true detachment, then even the attainment of the highest heavenly worlds will seem trivial and insignificant to you. Arjuna asserted, Krishna, even if I were given a rulership over the three worlds, and I were made master over all of creation, it would mean nothing to me. I have no interest in any of these things. So, Lord Krishna has emphasized so much to have the control on individual's senses. Because if we follow the senses, they will lead us to all evil ways. So we must use our wisdom. Whatever task we are going to start, just ask, just put a question, ask yourself, the task which I am going to start, is it good for me? Is it good for mankind? Is it approved by God? Does it not disobey the rules of divinity? So we must ascertain before taking up any task, and we must strive hard to control our senses. If we become just slave to our senses, slave to our mind, then our whole life will be ruined and we will be going away and away from divinity, from God. So always remember your soul, remember your Atma, have awareness that I am not this body, I am not this mind, I am not this ego, but I am the birthless, omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent Atma, Atma, Atma. If we continuously forever have this awareness and self attention, then we will not be prey to the senses. The senses will follow us. If we follow the senses, we are ruining our life. Huh? If we force the senses to follow us, then we are on the right path. We are following the right path. So, Baba also has emphasized so much on the control of senses because if we are able to control our senses, then we are wise people. We are on the right path. If we do not follow the instructions given by Lord Krishna in Bhagavad Gita and Satya Sai Baba through his discourses to the students, we must understand these basic principles of life turning towards divinity because we are divine. We must understand we are divine. God and Atma are divine. So we are divine. This truth we have to always keep in mind that we are divine. We are, we as Atma and God are one. We have all the attributes of God, but we have forgotten. That is the main reason we are suffering. We are undergoing through. dark age through ignorance. So here I end my video. Thank you for watching this